My name is Sophie. I'm 30 years old, and I have lived with a heavy secret for more than a decade. Before I take you on this journey, let me say this: if you're new here, please subscribe to my channel, because what you're about to hear is not just my story, but also a warning, a lesson, and perhaps even a mirror for someone out there. I was only 19 when the night that changed everything happened. A night I still see every time I close my eyes. I had been laughing with my younger sister, Amelia. She was just 15 at the time. We had been close. Not the kind of sisters who fought all the time, but the kind who shared secrets under the covers and dreamed about the future together. But that night carved a scar so deep in my life, it nearly destroyed me. It was a chilly evening in late October. The kind of night when the wind carries the smell of burning leaves and the streets are darker than usual. Amelia had asked me to walk with her to the corner store. I didn't want to. I had an assignment due, and my mind was buzzing with deadlines. But she insisted. She looked at me with those big pleading eyes, and like always, I caved. Just 10 minutes, I had told myself. 10 minutes that would cost me 11 years of guilt. We walked side by side, laughing, pushing each other like sisters do. I remember the glow of the street lights, the sound of our sneakers against the cracked pavement, and Amelia's soft humming of some song she had just discovered. Everything seemed so ordinary. And then, in the blink of an eye, it wasn't. The accident happened so fast I couldn't process it. 1 second Amelia was right beside me, the next she was on the ground, unconscious, her body twisted in a way that no body should ever be. The sound of screeching tires burned into my ears, but before I could even register where it came from, the vehicle had vanished into the night. I screamed. I screamed until my throat tore, calling her name, begging her to wake up. A neighbor ran out after hearing the commotion and called for help. The ambulance came, the flashing red and blue lights staining the night sky. But in the chaos, I didn't even realize something else was happening, something that would destroy me far more than Amelia's accident ever could. When my parents arrived at the hospital, their eyes were not filled with comfort or sympathy. They were filled with anger. Pure, sharp, cutting anger. My father's first words weren't, "Is Amelia okay?" They were, "What did you do?" My mother wouldn't even look at me, and as Amelia lay in the ICU, fighting for her life, my parents decided right then and there, I was to blame. You should have protected her. You should have stopped her from leaving. You were the older sister. It's your fault. Their words were knives, and each one cut deeper than the last. I tried to explain. I tried to tell them about the sound of the car, about the way it sped off, about the fact that I didn't even have time to react. But they didn't listen. They never did. To them, the story was simple. If I had said no, if I had kept Amelia inside, she would never have been on that street. And so, at 19, I became the villain in my own family's story. The years that followed were suffocating. Imagine sitting at the dinner table, feeling every eye burning into you, every silence loaded with blame. Imagine walking into a room and feeling like a ghost, like no one wants to acknowledge you, because your very presence is a reminder of their pain. I lived like that, day after day, year after year. At first, I fought back. I told them it wasn't fair, that I wasn't the one who hit her. But their stares, their cold shoulders, and their endless accusations wore me down. Eventually, I stopped fighting. I began to believe them. I began to wonder if maybe they were right. Maybe I should have done something differently. Maybe it really was my fault. Guilt is a powerful poison, and once it's inside you, it spreads, choking everything else. By the time I turned 25, I had stopped celebrating birthdays altogether. What was the point? Every year just reminded me of the night Amelia lost her future and I lost my place in the family. My parents still cared for Amelia. They were attentive, loving, protective. But with me, it was different. Their love had turned to resentment, and nothing I did could change it. I buried myself in work, in school, in anything that could distract me. Outwardly, people thought I was strong, independent, successful. Inside, I was crumbling. I carried a secret shame, one I never dared to speak aloud. To the outside world, I was Sophie, a girl chasing her career, traveling, making new friends. But behind closed doors, I was Sophie, the girl who killed her sister. And that's how I lived for 11 long years, under the weight of blame, under the shadow of silence. Until one day, something happened that would shake the ground beneath my feet and force me to confront the truth I had buried for so long. But that is what I will tell you in the next part. For 11 years, I carried a title that no one spoke aloud but everyone thought, the guilty one. It wasn't written on my forehead, but it might as well have been. Every look, every sigh, every silence from my parents reminded me that I was no longer just Sophie. I was the girl who ruined everything. The early years were the hardest. I was 19 when it all happened. Amelia was 15, and our lives were supposed to be just beginning. I should have been thinking about college, about my first serious job, about love and dreams and possibilities. Instead, every step I took felt like walking through mud, heavy and suffocating. At first, I thought time would heal things. I told myself that maybe, when Amelia recovered, when she grew stronger, my parents would soften too. I believed that maybe they would realize I wasn't the monster they painted me to be. But the truth is, time didn't heal anything. It only hardened the walls they had built around me. Meals at the dinner table became unbearable. I'd sit down, and the air would instantly grow colder. My father rarely spoke to me, and when he did, his words were short, clipped, like he was forcing them out. My mother, her silence hurt the most. She used to be my comfort, my safe place. But after that night, it was like she had erased me from her heart. She would fuss over Amelia, stroke her hair, bring her meals, and then turn away from me without a glance. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was just the shadow in the corner. It's strange how silence can be louder than words. Sometimes, I wish they would scream at me, shout, throw plates if they had to. Anything would have been better than that crushing silence. At least anger is still a kind of love. It means you still matter enough to fight with. But silence meant I was nothing. I tried to overcompensate. I cleaned the house, cooked meals, ran errands, worked extra shifts to bring in money. I thought maybe if I showed them I was useful, if I pawed myself into saving them, they might forgive me. But nothing changed. No matter what I did, their eyes never softened. To them, I would always be the older sister who failed. And the guilt? Oh, the guilt became my constant companion. At night, when the world was quiet, I would replay that evening over and over in my mind. What if I had said no? What if I had insisted Amelia stay home? What if I had grabbed her hand and refused to walk with her? My mind became a prison, and the walls were made of what ifs. I didn't just carry guilt, I wore it. It showed in my posture, in the way I avoided people's eyes, in the way I never spoke too loudly. Friends noticed, of course. They would ask, Sophie, are you okay? And I would smile and say, I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning, and no one could see it. At school and later at work, I became the responsible one. Always punctual, always prepared, always ready to help. People praised me for being dependable, but they didn't know that it wasn't virtue driving me, it was punishment. I felt like I didn't deserve happiness, so I buried myself in responsibility instead. If I was useful, maybe I could justify my existence. Holidays were the worst. Christmas, birthdays, any day that should have been filled with laughter and joy became reminders of what I had lost. Amelia would unwrap her gifts, and I would watch as my parents' faces lit up for her. When it was my turn, their smiles vanished. I remember one Christmas in particular. Amelia got a beautiful silver necklace, something she had wanted for months. When I opened my box, it was socks. Just socks. That was my place in their hearts. Practical, forgettable, undeserving. I told myself I didn't care, but deep down, I did. I cared more than I could admit. I wanted them to love me again, to see me again. I wanted my family back. But every year that passed only dug the divide deeper. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I started to withdraw completely. I stopped bringing friends home because I couldn't bear for anyone to see the way my parents treated me. I stopped sharing parts of myself, stopped laughing as loudly, stopped dreaming out loud. I shrank into a smaller version of Sophie, one that could fit into the background without bothering anyone. But no matter how small I tried to make myself, the guilt didn't shrink with me. It grew heavier, like carrying a stone in my chest that I couldn't put down. Even when Amelia forgave me, and yes, she did, in her own quiet way, it didn't matter, because my parents' eyes still told a different story. And when you're told something long enough, you start to believe it. I began to believe I was cursed, that I was the kind of person who ruins lives. It affected every relationship I tried to build. I didn't let anyone get too close. I was terrified that if they knew the truth about me, they'd leave too. I dated a few times, but it never lasted. How could it? I didn't even love myself. How could I expect anyone else to? I became so used to carrying guilt that I didn't know who I was without it. It defined me. It shaped every decision, every thought. I was Sophie, the guilty one. Sophie, the mistake. Sophie, the failure. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice refused to die. A voice that whispered, maybe it wasn't your fault. Maybe the story isn't as simple as they made it. For years, I tried to silence that voice. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was just trying to escape responsibility. But the older I got, the louder that voice became. Until one day, it grew too loud to ignore. That was the day I started to search for answers. And that search would take me to a place I never expected, a place where the truth was waiting, buried but not forgotten. But before I found the truth, I had to face the doubts that had been haunting me for years. And that is where the next part of my story begins. For years, I tried to convince myself that silence was the best answer, that if I just lived with the blame, if I accepted it like a scar I couldn't erase, then maybe the pain would eventually fade. But the truth has a way of clawing at you, no matter how deep you bury it. At first, the doubts were small, just tiny cracks in the story my parents had built. I would hear them talk in hushed tones when they thought I wasn't listening. Phrases like, the report said, and we shouldn't tell her, would drift through the walls, leaving me restless at night. My parents weren't the type to keep secrets, or at least they hadn't been before. So why now? Why keep things from me, if the story was as clear as they made it out to be? And then there were the memories that never sat quite right. I remember the way the tires screeched that night, the smell of burnt rubber hanging in the air. I remembered the way the headlights blinded me for just a split second before vanishing down the street. If Amelia's accident had been just a fall, or a clumsy mistake, as my parents insisted later, then why did I remember a car speeding away? Why did I remember the distinct sound of metal against pavement? But every time I tried to bring it up, my parents shut me down. Stop making excuses, Sophie. You're just trying to run away from your guilt. Those were their favorite lines. And after years of hearing them, I started to doubt myself. Maybe my memory had twisted things. Maybe trauma had created false images in my mind. I wanted so badly to believe them, because believing them meant the story was simple, and the pain had a shape I could understand. But that little voice inside me refused to go quiet. The older I got, the more the doubts grew. They whispered to me when I couldn't sleep, when I stared at my reflection in the mirror, when I sat alone on my birthday wondering if I even deserved to celebrate. By the time I turned 28, those doubts had become unbearable. I started asking questions. Small ones at first. I asked Amelia if she remembered that night, but she shook her head. She told me she had blacked out before the ambulance even arrived. I asked old neighbors, but their answers were vague. They remembered the sirens, the commotion, but not much else. And then one day, a friend of mine, someone who had studied law, said something that stuck with me. If there was an accident involving a minor, there has to be a police report. Even if nobody was charged, there has to be a record. A police report. The words lit something inside me. Could it be true? Was there an official record of what happened that night? And if there was, what would it say? I tried asking my parents directly. I remember the look on my father's face when I brought it up. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkened, and he said, "Let it go, Sophie. The past won't change." My mother turned away, her lips pressed into a thin line. That reaction told me more than their words ever could. They were hiding something. That was the moment I knew. The story I had been told for 11 years wasn't the whole story. The doubts turned into determination. I couldn't keep living under this cloud of guilt without knowing the truth. I began searching. I contacted the local police department. At first, they said records at Old were hard to access, but with persistence, I managed to file a request. Weeks passed, and every day felt like a century. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think of anything else. And then one morning, a thin envelope arrived in the mail. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were a few pieces of paper, stamped and official-looking. My heart pounded as I scanned the words. And there it was. The truth I had been denied for over a decade. The report was clear. Amelia's accident wasn't just an accident. It wasn't a fall. It wasn't me being careless. It was caused by a third party, a driver. A driver who had been drinking. My breath caught in my throat as I read the details. The car had been spotted speeding down our street just minutes before the incident. Witnesses had described erratic driving. The driver had fled the scene but was later identified. My sister wasn't hurt because of me. She was hurt because a stranger made a reckless, selfish choice to drink and drive. I dropped the papers onto the table and just sat there, staring into nothing. For 11 years, I had carried the weight of guilt that wasn't mine. For 11 years, I had let my parents' blame define who I was. And all along, the truth had been written down, locked away in some dusty file. I cried that night. Not the quiet tears I was used to, but deep, racking sobs that shook my whole body. It wasn't just relief. It was grief. Grief for the years I had lost, for the version of myself I had buried under guilt, for the love I had been denied because of a lie. But even through the tears, a new feeling began to rise. Anger. How could my parents know this and still blame me? How could they let me suffer, let me believe I had ruined Amelia's life, when the truth was right there in black and white? The doubts that had haunted me for years were gone now, replaced by something sharper. A need for answers. A need for confrontation. And that confrontation was coming. Because the truth was finally in my hands, and nothing would ever be the same again. When the envelope first arrived, I almost didn't open it. It was so thin, so ordinary, as if it contained nothing more important than a phone bill or a flyer. But my heart told me otherwise. My hands trembled as I slid my finger under the seal, pulling out the folded sheets of paper that would change my life forever. The first thing I noticed was the official stamp, the kind you only see on government documents. My breath caught. This wasn't just rumor, or speculation, or something overheard in passing. This was the truth, captured on paper, preserved for more than a decade. I sat down at my kitchen table, the report spread out before me. My eyes scanned the words, struggling to focus through the blur of tears welling up. At first, I saw only fragments, vehicular involvement, witness accounts, suspected intoxication. Each phrase hit me like a hammer. And then, the full picture came into focus. Amelia's accident hadn't been some random tragedy or my supposed carelessness. It had been caused by a driver, a man in his late 20s, intoxicated, driving recklessly through our neighborhood. Witnesses saw him swerving, speeding, and then, right where we had been walking, losing control. The sound I remembered, those screeching tires, the flash of headlights, it had all been real. My memory hadn't betrayed me. But the worst part, the report said he fled the scene. He left a 15-year-old girl lying broken on the pavement and never looked back. Later, police caught up with him, but the damage was already done. Amelia's life changed forever, and so did mine. I gripped the edges of the paper so tightly my knuckles turned white. For 11 years, I had been crushed under guilt that was never mine to carry. 11 years of believing I was the villain in my sister's story. 11 years of silence, of punishment, of being the scapegoat. And all along, the truth was sitting in some dusty file cabinet at the police department. The tears came hard and fast. I dropped my head into my hands and sobbed like I hadn't sobbed in years. It wasn't relief. It was grief. Grief for the young woman I could have been if I hadn't been branded guilty. Grief for the birthdays I never celebrated, the friends I pushed away, the chances at love I destroyed because I thought I didn't deserve happiness. And then, beneath the grief, another emotion rose. Anger. A burning, scorching anger that made my chest tighten. Why didn't my parents tell me? The report was clear, detailed, undeniable. They must have known. They must have read it. And yet, instead of telling me the truth, instead of comforting me, they chose to blame me. They let me carry the burden while Amelia healed, while our family pretended to move on. They watched me shrink into a shell of myself, watched me suffer in silence, and said nothing. I thought back to all the times I had pleaded with them, begged them to believe me when I said I hoed a car. Their cold eyes, their dismissive words, "Stop making excuses, Sophie." Excuses. That's what they called my truth. The report proved I had been right all along. But instead of vindication, all I felt was betrayal. Because now I had a new question. What kind of parents let their child live as the villain when the real villain was out there? I pushed the report away, stood up, and paced the room. My thoughts raced. Had they lied to protect Amelia? Had they been too broken to face the truth? Or had they simply found it easier to pour their pain into me instead of confronting the stranger who ruined our lives? Whatever the reason, it didn't matter anymore. The damage was done. I had spent over a decade in a prison of their making. And now, finally, I had the key to unlock the door. I picked the report back up and read it again, this time slowly, carefully, making sure I didn't miss a single word. The driver's name, the officer's notes, the timestamp. It was all there, cold and factual. I thought back to that night, the screech of tires, the blinding headlights, Amelia's body hitting the ground. For so long, I had doubted my own memory. Trauma plays tricks, they say. But no, my memory had been right. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't failed. A strange kind of strength settled over me then. The kind that comes when you realize you've been wronged, deeply and unfairly. For years, I had been small, quiet, apologetic. But holding that report in my hands, I felt something new. Power. Because now I had proof. Proof that I wasn't guilty. Proof that my parents' accusations were built on lies, whether intentional or not. Proof that could finally set me free. But freedom wouldn't come easily. To get it, I would have to confront the very people who raised me, who hurt me, who let me suffer for so long. And that thought terrified me. What if they still refused to believe me? What if even with the report, they clung to their version of events? Could I survive being rejected all over again? Yet, deep down, I knew there was no going back. The truth was out now, and truth demands to be spoken. I folded the papers carefully, placed them back into the envelope, and pressed it to my chest. My tears had dried, but the fire inside me burned stronger than ever. After 11 years, I was ready. Ready to face them. Ready to show them the truth. Ready to reclaim the life they had stolen from me. The confrontation was coming, and it would change everything. The night before I confronted my parents, I barely slept. I kept pacing my apartment, the police report resting on the table like a silent witness. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured Amelia's face, my father's accusing glare, my mother's silence. For years I had dreamed of this moment, proving my innocence. But now that it was here, I felt paralyzed. What if the truth wasn't enough? Morning came, whether I was ready or not. I dressed slowly, carefully, as though the right clothes might shield me from what was to come. My hands shook as I tucked the envelope into my bag. I whispered to myself, "You are not guilty, Sophie. You never were. Driving to my parents' house felt like moving through a fog. Every landmark on the way carried memories. My school, where I had hidden my shame behind good grades. The park, where Amelia and I used to laugh on the swings. By the time I pulled into their driveway, my stomach was in knots. The house hadn't changed. Same white shutters, same neat garden, same feeling of suffocation pressing down on me as I walked up the path. I rang the bell. My father answered, surprise flashing across his face before it hardened into his usual expression, cold, unreadable. My mother appeared behind him, her eyes flicking to me, then away. Amelia was in the living room, a book in her lap. She smiled softly, but even her smile carried years of distance. I sat down across from them, the envelope resting in my lap like a loaded gun. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. My heart pounded so loudly I thought they might hear it. Finally, I broke the silence. I know what happened the night of the accident. My father's brow furrowed. We've been through this, Sophie. Don't start again. I pulled the report from the envelope and placed it on the coffee table. No, we haven't. You've been lying to me. For 11 years. My mother stiffened. My father's jaw clenched. Amelia looked between us, confusion written across her face. I pushed the papers toward them. This is the police report. The one you never showed me. It says Amelia was hit by a drunk driver. Not me. Not my choices. A stranger. And you knew. The room went still. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my mother's hand went to her mouth, her eyes glistening. My father stared at the report but didn't reach for it. Amelia leaned forward, her voice trembling. Is this true? I nodded, tears burning my eyes. Yes. I've carried your blame for more than a decade. I believed I was responsible for ruining your life, Amelia. I believed I was the reason you suffered. But I wasn't. It was him. And Mom, Dad, you let me believe otherwise. My voice cracked, but I pressed on. Do you know what that did to me? Do you know how it feels to spend 11 years thinking you're a monster? To shrink, to hide, to hate yourself every single day, because your parents decided it was easier to blame you than face the truth. My father finally spoke, his voice low, almost offensive. We didn't want to put Amelia through more trauma. We thought, if we told you both it was just an accident, it would be easier. Easier for who? I snapped, my voice rising for the first time in years. Easier for you. So you didn't have to explain that a drunk driver destroyed our family? So you didn't have to feel helpless? You sacrificed me for your comfort. You let me rot in guilt so you could avoid facing the truth. My mother's tears spilled over. We were scared, Sophie. We didn't know how to handle it. We thought, maybe if you carried some of it, Amelia wouldn't have to. I stared at her in disbelief. So you traded one daughter's healing for another's destruction. Amelia's eyes filled with tears. Sophie, I never blamed you. Not once. But I saw the way they looked at you, and I didn't know how to stop it. Her voice broke. I'm sorry. Her words pierced me. For years, I had longed to hear them. But even as they soothed part of me, the anger still burned. I turned back to my parents. You broke me. Do you understand that? You let me believe I was the villain in this family. You let me waste 11 years of my life under a lie. I'll never get those years back. My father looked away, his face pale, his hands clenched. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Shame. Real, raw shame. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled back. I wasn't ready for forgiveness. Not yet. The silence that followed was different this time. Not cold, not punishing, just heavy with truth. I stood up, clutching the envelope. My voice was steady now, stronger than it had been in years. I'm done carrying this. I'm done being your scapegoat. The truth is out, and you can't bury it anymore. I'm not guilty. I never was. Amelia stood too, tears streaming down her cheeks. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I love you, Sophie. I'm so sorry you went through this alone." For the first time in 11 years, I let myself believe her. My parents said nothing as I walked to the door. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they wouldn't. But it didn't matter anymore. The weight I had carried for so long was gone. The chains had broken. Stepping outside, I felt the sunlight on my face, warm and freeing. For the first time since I was 19, I could breathe. Truly breathe. And as I looked up at the sky, I knew this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. A chance to rebuild, to rediscover who Sophie was without guilt. A chance to live. So to anyone listening right now, who has ever been blamed for something they didn't do, who has ever carried guilt that wasn't theirs, hear me. The truth matters. Your voice matters. And no matter how long it takes, the truth has a way of finding its way to the light. After 11 years, mine finally did.